This is a question to the entire panel, and actually maybe Roger, your comments earlier about Copenhagen being the beginning of a process when in fact it's the 15th of, which has been going on since 1997, and perhaps maybe for Deirdre and Roger again, your party support of the Birmingham International expansion of the airport, the new coal-fired power stations we see springing up around the country, and of course Heathrow. I mean, do you think this in some ways shows a politics that accepts the science, which you all seem to do, but is incapable of acting on it, and maybe demonstrates that the current political system will never be able to create that kind of traction, and we need some kind of like grassroots movement that is really capable of combating climate change.
Yeah, okay. We'll start with the airports. I personally haven't flown for a number of years and have no intention of doing so in the foreseeable future.
Why?
Because I don't like it particularly, and because I don't think it's a very green way to travel. And I don't particularly, I'm quite happy to holiday, you know, in other ways. So, that's unusual. Anyway, so personally, I'm not actually going 2 or 3 times a year on an aeroplane. And I would prefer to see a lot of flights cut down, particularly business flights. I'd like to see a lot more video conferencing. I think that'd be a really good way than everyone just jumping on an aeroplane, because it's on expenses and I'm not paying, and going all around the world. It's completely mad. Yes, well, unfortunately, they got a video conference, and maybe you get more around the table there.
I wish it was further away and more expensive.
Well, far away for some people. And you mentioned coal-fired power stations as well, and we want clean, obviously we want clean energy, so yes, as long as they're clean, that's no problem. My party certainly supports that. As far as Birmingham Airport itself is concerned, as I say, I don't particularly want to see any expansion of any airport, that's my personal view. I'd rather we did something about cutting down the number of flights. But if you are going to expand, I think it's probably better to expand in other places rather than Heathrow, because I really do think Heathrow is completely blocked, and the whole area around there, and if you're stuck in a traffic jam, you're obviously burning up more, and so I don't think that's a good idea. I think if you're going to do it, I would do it somewhere else, but I'd rather not do it at all.
I'll say there hasn't been a crash in the West End of London yet, and the approach to Heathrow is over the West End of London. It is fundamentally rather dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, taking the issue of Birmingham Airport, I mean, my view that what is practical politics is that we ought to look at aiming policy, and not through rationing but through taxation and other measures, to keep air travel at about the level it is today. Now that means you do have to probably invest in better long-distance high-speed rail. It means you have to tax air travel more. Within that, there is actually a good case for saying you scrap the expansion of Heathrow and you lengthen the runway at Birmingham, because that means people don't have to travel down to Heathrow to go on long-distance flights. Birmingham runway, the issue at Birmingham is that the runway simply isn't long enough to go more than medium distance. So I'm not at all in favour of any growth in air travel, but I think there is actually a good case for lengthening the runway at Birmingham.
They're running out of money.
Well, yes, it may well not happen because there isn't the money to do it.
Ian, can I ask, talks about individual members of the respective parties seem to be quite against airports, but yet the national stance is arguing a bit different. Where does the Green Party stand on this?
Well, the Green Party clearly is against expansion of air travel. With an 80% cut we're talking about by 2050, at least actually, for the government at the minute, every sector will have to have a reduction, and air travel is probably about the hardest to reduce the actual fuel it uses. So it needs to reduce, there's no way it can be expanding. As clear as that. We'd also say actually, we claim there's something like a £9 billion a year subsidy for air travel compared to cars. That's quite simply, they don't pay the fuel tax that cars do. So it's a very unfair playing field at the minute. You could put the tax up to that, but it needs international agreement on that, and then the market would decide quite clearly against air travel.
Okay, question there, please. Yeah.
The panel saying that they're against flights, but poor countries that have large areas of the rainforest that live on tourism in order not to destroy those rainforests. So more tax for the air flights, less people traveling there, more deforestation, and that causes more of an issue, the carbon issue.
Sorry, can you just say that once more?
Simplify it.
Yeah, well, more deforestation will cause more problems to the carbon issue in the atmosphere, isn't it? So stopping people traveling, which is saying it's not a green way to travel, but stopping people travel will increase deforestation, and that.
So you're saying the alternative, if they don't have tourism, which is funded by Westerners travelling,
Yeah.
then they'll have to undertake deforestation.
Yeah.
Scott, please.
That's an excellent point. The thing about this is there is no single action that is going to be taken that is not going to have rippling effects. And we could talk, for example, about the question of moving towards more efficient food production, for example, and then producing ethanol, which is instead of petrol, which has caused its own problems. But to address your question directly, to deal with those effects, you have to have a collective effort which goes beyond the national. So, for example, with poor countries that would suffer because they don't get the tourist income, you have to effectively agree to create some type of fund, an international fund, to even out those costs. If we're really serious about this, right? In the same way that we talked about the fact that when we were going to deal with the debt problem of the 1980s, we couldn't just simply walk away from it and do token steps. Countries that are going to suffer because, in effect, we have to change patterns of living, there has to be a compensation from the developed world for the so-called developing world. Politically, you can already anticipate the difficulties of it, but that's the nub of what has to be faced, either now or in the near future.